Good afternoon, Baiba.
And good morning, you too, Christopher and Heidi.
Yeah, we are crazy excited for this one because we have a super special guest in Heidi Hackemer. Um, okay, Heidi, here we go. So, for more than 20 years, not that anyone's counting, right? You have been doing brand strategy where it absolutely counts. I mean, you've been advising leaders at Nike, Microsoft, Ford, you've been building your own strategy shops. You led Oatly's North America creative team through its Super Bowl moment and launching Oatly Future Labs to explore all these really cool, radically better futures. I mean, you've worked agency side, in-house, on your own. And this is probably something we won't be able to say about a lot of our guests. You have also advised the Obama White House during one of its more important moments. You've lived out of a truck. You worked on the Pine Ridge Reservation. But really, like that red thread, that through line here is simpler. I mean, you just run towards the most interesting, high stakes problems and just do really interesting work. And so we know like a lot of things you do sometimes live underneath NDA. So
Right.
all of what you might be able to share or not, certainly up to you. Some of it's been very politically nuanced, as well. Um, but yeah, we like to think that you run to those pressure-filled, complex problems because oftentimes that's where the best strategy is really needed. We also feel like you don't believe that like strategy should always come down from the mountaintop, that it should be something very co-created. And we feel like this is something that you really, embody. And fun fact, somehow you still seem to start every single assignment with good old four C's, a whiteboard, and a Diet Coke.
I do. I do. In fact, I have my Diet Coke here to get me going to do this. So
I can roll.
it's my daily fridge cigarette that I have every morning.
So Heidi, Baiba and I are more than honored to have you. Welcome to brandLingual.
Thank you so much for having me. I have so much respect for both of you. So to be asked to do this was like amazing. Thank you so much.
Okay, I will ask the one opening question where we could start to have a conversation. This is something that we have debated, and we know that a lot of practitioners, whether it's in strategy or in account planning, however we want to call it, we have learned a lot of things at the very beginning of our career journey, and then later on, we have unlearned a lot of stuff. What are the things that you learned at the beginning of your career and what you have unlearned later on?
Okay. I'm going to start with one that's just very basic, and then we'll go on. And then there's two I want to share. So the first one is just kind of whatever. The first one is I never do focus groups ever. I haven't done a focus group in 10 years. I refuse to do backroom focus groups where you're behind the glass and you're watching people in an environment that is totally false and just leads to shitty insights. So I think in the beginning of my career, I was probably in back rooms all the time. I mean, I was like constantly like we were in the back room testing something or learning about something. I refuse to do that. I think it's so machine like. It's just fake. It's pushing a process through a machine that does not reflect humanity or reflect emotion and truth. And so that's one that I'm just like, no, I don't do it. I don't touch it anymore. But that's just kind of like a functional one. I would say like a deeper one, and Christopher, you actually brought this up in my intro, is actually the process and the practice of brand strategy and how I do it. When I started, it was very strategists went off and they, did their whole thing. And then they came back with kind of the pronouncement on the hill. And then like everyone just like flowed out of the brief. And I remember when at my very first agency at FCB, which had a tremendous planning department that I learned so much from. I mean, my God, like if I hadn't started there, I don't know if I would have loved the discipline the way I love it and been able to do it the way I've been able to do it. But even in that department, I still remember moments where you would unveil the strategy, and you would hope that other departments, the creatives, the account people, or the client would see your brilliance, and you would try to get in there, just construct this like perfect strategy going into those meetings. And that is something that I have absolutely unlearned. And it's both the ego of the discipline that I had to deconstruct and the ego of the self. Because in the discipline, we have this ego sometimes, and I think it's an inherited ego where we are the smart ones in the process, right? And we kick off the process and we kick it off with brilliance. And I'm not going to lie, that feels pretty good as an ego as a person, right? And so to deconstruct it both from a professional practice standpoint, but also from a personal standpoint of you don't have to be that person in the room. You can be a different person in the room and actually get to a better outcome. It was like a dual deconstruction that I had to do. And so now, I mean, I've spent the whole week sitting in the room with clients and creatives batting around what we should do next for a brand that I'm working on right now. There's no brief. We're just talking. We're just having daily conversations about like, okay. And like, I'm the one that has to drive the stimulus of those conversations. Like we have the conversation every day. In between, I'm taking in what the last one was and bringing in new stimulus and thoughts. And what if we framed it this way or whatever, here's 4 pathways we could take. Here's the pros and cons of each. But it is not how I was taught 20 years ago of the strategist on the hill, the lone strategist that comes back with, it's not like the Moses moment, right? Like there's no Moses moment anymore.
Do you remember the project or the meeting that started pushing you on that path to pull that out of your practice or unlearn? And maybe it wasn't one perfect little clean moment, but
No.
you have to imagine over time there was like a pre and post Heidi on that point.
It started to crack when I was at BBH, where I was working on the Google Chrome account, and we all sat together. The thing that was really remarkable was 𝗂𝗟𝗟𝗿𝗄 and his brother 𝘂𝗟𝗟𝗄𝗿 were the 2 creatives on it. So I had these brother creative directors they're amazing. Both of them in their own right and together are amazing, amazing creatives. And you know how it is in the industry, like the creatives get the offices. So the way BBH was constructed is that like the office was ringed with offices with doors, and then there were like the rows of where the not so senior people would work. And once you got senior enough, you would get one of those offices, right? And 𝗂𝗟𝗟𝗿𝗄 and 𝘂𝗟𝗟𝗄 were like the star creatives in BBH at the time. And they were like, no, this is stupid. They're also Swedish, so they have like a little bit different vibe on things. So they gave up their offices and they came out on the row. And we all sat on the row together. So 𝗂𝗟𝗟𝗿𝗄 sat right next to me. And then Colleen Leddy, the engagement strategist, sat right across from me because the rows like faced each other. And the account person, like Dane Larson, sat right there, and Jesse Jariga and 𝗂𝗟𝗟𝗿𝗄. And like, so the whole working team just sat in a huddle all day, every day. And that was kind of radical at the time. And the other thing we did, and I know this, and I really think physicality is important, in those rows, it was basically like a row of desks, and then it was another row that faced you. So like you were literally facing the person that sat across from you. And there was a divider that was kind of like 2 feet high. So you had a little bit of privacy between the person that you were facing. And we all went in one weekend and we ripped out the dividers. So it really was like this pod. And so that's where it started to crack. And I give 𝗂𝗟𝗟𝗿𝗄 a lot of credit for that, in fact, tons of credit for that, because they stopped acting like dick swinging creative directors. And they were like, no, like we're doing this together, right? And it was their example that started to break down those handoff processes and make it more of a collaborative process across the stream. And then I would say the second thing, so that was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I would say the second thing is, the more that I stretch brand strategy into spaces that outside of advertising, like, you know, political spaces or nonprofit spaces or other spaces like that, the more I didn't know about how they operated. Like there's no process. Like when you're working with a marketing client, we all kind of know the process, right? You kind of hit the beats and you go through the process, right? Political folks don't know what brand strategy is, right? And neither do nonprofits. Like they don't know. And to be frank, like their organizations operate in ways that are way different than a private sector client. And so it was kind of like 2 entities coming together that didn't know the other. And so you couldn't afford to just run the normal processes. You had I had to learn about them. They had to learn about me. We had to talk. We had to figure it out. And that's another example, another big moment, like where this stuff really started to break down quite a bit.
So, I mean, it sounds like you have been in a position where you have kind of translated your craft into other side's craft. Like you have tried to build this fluency in the language also between the teams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Like, and there's a lot of translation and language that like, I change my language for every client or for every project because you just don't know what you're walking into, or like you have to. Like when I was at 𝗂𝗪𝗏𝗃, brand was a dirty word. So I was leading the narrative discipline and everything was about narrative, and you had to change the language so like they would understand it. A lot of times in nonprofit, government, philanthropy spaces, brand is not a great word to bring into the room. So you have to change your language in those spaces. You don't call audiences target markets in nonprofits. You just don't. Like, it's not how you work. You do not walk into indigenous spaces and say, we're going to set up a war room. Like a white person walking into an indigenous place be like, I'm going to set up a war room. Like that does not work, right? So every culture I intersect with, and every company is different, and you have to change your language and your approaches with every company.
What is your discovery process on the front end of that to figure out where are the verboten words or the trigger words or the nuanced words or the unknown words? I mean, I know it happens naturally, but it seems like it's something that you're so conscious and intentional about in your practice that you probably go in knowing these are the first things you have to figure out.
Well, I know it now. I mean, like I kind of learned it by getting beat up a little bit, like not beat up, like I'm not the victim in this situation, but like, it took me like a few months at 𝗂𝗪𝗏𝗃 because I was mad. I was like, I'm a brand person. Like you hired a brand person, like let me use my language. And I finally realized like, just, it's fine. Just like let go of the language. Right. So now I'm a lot faster doing that, Chris, like, and some of the things I will literally ask in every assignment. You have the intimate client, like the one that's like brought you in, they're trying to set you up for success, that kind of thing. And so these are early questions I will ask my intimate client, like show me, like every organization has a different presentation style that they respond well to, right? Ford's presentation style is way different than Microsoft's, is way different than Nike's. And so instead of me stumbling around, show me 4 decks that have done well in your system.
Mm-hmm.
You go into political spaces, you're not writing decks, you're writing memos. So show me an example of 3 memos that have gotten a new idea through lately, So I'm very cognizant about asking about what kind of artifacts work in your system. How do you like say this thing? Like, what's your word for audience?
Yeah.
What's your, like I ask all of these questions up front. And it's funny, clients are like, oh, these are like actually the good questions. These are the questions like that help you actually succeed, right? You're also asking navigational questions like, okay, we have these stakeholders, but like, who's the real stakeholder? Who's the person that's going to come in and blow this thing up, right? So it's trying to get ahead of all the little things that you can stumble on.
What is the second thing then? You mentioned that you have unlearned.
Well, the first thing was the focus groups, like just don't do focus groups. And the second thing was like the strategy from on high. It was the go away and then come back. Another reason that I don't like doing that, and a mantra that we had starting at W&W, actually we really radically changed at W&W. It was a collaborative process with clients. And I don't like having my work blown up. I don't. I hate that moment when you present something and the room goes cold.
Mm.
And you can just feel it. I mean, you can feel the energy shift and people being like, oh, okay. Right. And we had one of those at W&W early. We had one where we presented something and the client was like, no, this is all wrong. And we had to like redo it really quickly. Then the client wasn't mad. They were just like, whoa, like this isn't what we were expecting. This isn't right. And so after that, we started a mantra, which I'm very serious about to this day, which is no surprises. And no surprises means that we are not going away for 6 weeks and coming back with an answer. Not that you can do 6 weeks anymore. You could do 6 weeks 10 years ago, but whatever the time frame is. As we're building this recommendation for you, client, we are having regular check-ins every week to show you like what we're thinking about right now, how we're shaping something, get your feedback. So by the end, when we do the final, it's almost inevitable. Like it's like an inevitable presentation or whatever that comes, or recommendation that comes out of the final. That's how I do all my work now. because I remember that feeling. You know that feeling? You know, where you're like, oh my God, I just worked on this for weeks and it just, the whole thing got blown up. I hate that feeling. It doesn't have to be that way.
No, and you'll never get that time back in your life. You know,
No.
it's like the money comes and goes, but that time you don't ever get back. And
Yeah.
that's really interesting because now we could tell you really feel those moments too, because it's just like the way that your face changed and your language changed. And so then it seems inevitable. It leads to more co-creation, co-learning, community, right? The co part in this seems to be the strong theory operating within your practice.
Absolutely. It's just how I naturally operate now, but it did take a relearning of how to do that and an ego death of some sort, you know? Like, I'm not the smartest person in the room. I'm not. I'm smart at one thing, but I'm not the smartest person in the room. There's a big difference there.
Interesting idea to have ego funerals. You know, might that just be like a good, like personal thing to encourage people to do is just kind of realize, just have your ego funeral, get over it. And in the afterlife, you're going to be much more,
Yeah,
comfortable with people here still on this mortal coil.
totally.
Yeah, that's
Totally. I think we could use ego funerals in a lot of aspects of the world right now. So, but we'll take it in brand strategy. We'll start with brand strategy.
yeah, we'll start.
But I think that also taking on kind of off that wall that you mentioned between the creatives and also strategists, it's also a little bit like ego funeral for team members, and also a moment where to find a common language, how we can now operate together, how we can better understand each other. Because I still believe there's so many agencies out there where teams are divided, where there's like, oh, I don't want to be, I don't know, I don't want to work close with a strategist in the same room or whatever. And it's still based on the brief delivering.
It is. Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't work in agencies a lot anymore, but I do know, yes, like this is still happening, right? Which is dumb.
I'm having a lot of conversations with people from different parts of the world, and then they are sharing their problems, and then this kind of age-old problem is still popping up, and it feels like, oh, this needs to, it needs to go away. It needs to be changed.
I agree.
Curious from your perspective, because this is such, what Baiba just said is in the end also very ironic that, our industry, which loves to pride itself on being so attuned to culture and sensitive to people and observing the world and interpreting the world and open to change and, again, finding those new shiny things, yet we're also terribly parochial and rigid and formal. And it's almost like underneath the surface, we really don't like change. Like those, you said that, the beats you hit, like marketing people, we have these beats, like it's this standard sheet music. And so it's like, it feels like there's such a strange juxtaposition between then the formality that we try to run everything underneath the surface, yet on the top, this performative, trying to always chase the new thing and be open to change. But yet it feels like those two things are in conflict.
I think that's the conflict of the human species, actually. Like the only constant is change, and people really hate change. And it's almost like it's like a Buddhist quest to be able to like just be like, look, like you have to be okay with change.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is why what is it, like 70 or 80% of all change management efforts fail inside of companies or something like that. Like people, because it's incentivization and value. Like if you take away the structure of me as strategist handing off the brief, and I could have this day where everyone thinks I'm really smart, I'm afraid of letting go of that moment and that value and that boost. And you have to just trust that actually there's a different kind of, boost in a different way, but that's taking a leap into an unknown. And I think that's very difficult for humans in general.
Change is always painful.
Change is hard. Change is painful. We resist it like crazy.
And then there's the no pain, no gain piece of this too, right? Like you have to have those moments, almost rites of passage that you pass through to then be forced to reflect on your own practice and how there might be a different way to do it when all of the forces around you are trying to get you to conform to a way that everyone else feels comfortable doing it. You stepping out, like in the intro, like sure, agency side, but then your own thing, and then different kinds of your own thing, working in different sectors, and then client side, and then this. It's like constantly passing over borders and walls, being exposed to all these different ways to think and practice. I mean, that's your passport is stamped all over the place. And now, right? And now this sort of modern professional you has that multilingualism and fluency across all sorts of different understandings. And it's good to be Heidi in this sense of what I'm realizing here, like, right? So if there are other ways that you're thinking about then enlightening the world to what you've learned or learning opportunities, publishing, training things, how for you to share those things and encourage more of that cross fluency, if any of that's going on.
Yeah, that's something that's really important to me, honestly. Like I alluded to earlier in this conversation, I started out in a tremendous planning department at FCB back in, what year was that? 2005. 2005 is when I switched into planning. I was a copywriter for 2 years, and then I went into planning. And like my teachers there were so generous. And I have always had very generous mentors and teachers throughout my career. And I really do believe that that's important to honor and to try to pass down in my own way, just to honor my mentors. It's like a thank you to my mentors. And it's really important to me. And I also think it's very important now because, God, this market and this industry is just like, I don't know what the hell is going on right now. I mean, I have my theories, we all do, but like, it is hard being young in this industry right now. And I feel very deeply for those that are trying to crack in. And I've always felt very deeply for those who don't, what I would call non-traditional talent, which we might call like LGBTQIA plus or BIPOC or what, you know what I mean? And I really feel for people who, especially now, the system is like, well, you're not really what the system like acknowledges, and that kind of breaks my heart with young talent. And so creating spaces for people to feel the support and feel the learning is very important to me. I just started writing again. I actually didn't write for years, and there's a whole lot of reasons why I didn't write for years, but I just started writing a Substack again, like about 3 months ago. And the whole reason I write it is because I'm like, my hope is that maybe there's one or two people that read something that I write and it helps them. I mean, that's it, right? It doesn't, I can't trace it to new business. Like I've never been able to trace my public posting or my Substacking or writing to business. My business comes in through like word of mouth and people I've known before. So it really is like it makes me feel good. Like I like writing, and even if I get one text message that was like, wow, that thing you wrote today, like it really made me think something different. The 8 hours of writing that piece, because I write my own stuff, I don't do AI. Because for me, and I'm not slagging off anyone that writes with AI, but like for me, the act of writing is a creative act for me, and that like I want to write, like I want to write it. You know what I mean? And the writing is a part of the value, is part of the gift and the value exchange. Like I get a gift when people come back to me and say that really helped. And so I'm like trying to put the energy out first by doing the writing myself, My hope, I kind of think of myself now as like, I kind of joke about this, like a strategy auntie. Like I'm kind of getting older and I don't have kids. And so how can I be the auntie that like helps other people?
I think it's very important to share with the younger generation because they are struggling a lot. And I agree with you, Heidi. The question that they normally ask me in these coffee chats is like, how can I even get in? Because now the requirements are so high. I need a master's, I need this, I need experience in the field. And if I don't have it, I just can't get in. And what is your
Which is stupid. Which is stupid on our part to build those gates. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Baiba, but like those are dumb gates. Like there is nothing about having a master's degree that makes you better at brand strategy. Nothing. Nothing. My husband, who's one of the like most successful creative directors of his time, high school dropout, college dropout, right? Never, and like the ability to feel people, and like there's nothing you're going to learn in a master's program that's going to help. But well, maybe, I mean, I'm being probably deliberately provocative right now, but like I just don't think that like that is dumb. it's not the kid's fault. It's our fault. It's our fault for saying, oh, to work in advertising, you need a master's degree. No, you don't. You absolutely do not need a master's degree to work in advertising. You need to be curious. You need to have a good sense of people. You need to love creativity, and you need to be willing to learn. And like, that's it. So I'm sorry, Baiba. This like this gets my hackles up when I hear stuff like this. And I know you're not advocating for it. It just gets my hackles up. That's all. Okay.
Yeah, but this also goes into this kind of like two things that it's there's like unwritten rule in advertising that it's not that much about how much do you know about advertising or strategy, but it's more about like who do you know? And then it goes into the networking topic. Like if you want to get in, you really need to get those coffee chats and really network with people, which is also very hard nowadays because nobody has time to even share those 30 minutes and have a conversation with that young talent.
Yeah, that's fair.
This theme of gatekeeping and gate crashing and pounding down the gates and bringing the bridge down, like this was also a theme in Rob Scotland's episode with this from the previous session. I mean, what are those when you look ahead, right? Are there particular gates, right, or boundaries or borders that you're more excited about trying to chip away at, or just torch or blow up? Moving ahead. Again, you have a lot of passion for that, and that's not something just one person can do. Like we need we need a whole army of people out there trying to do that, particularly at this point.
Yeah, I agree with that. You know, when I look at the vibe of the world right now, we are rewarding cruelty, or we're not rewarding it. It's what's winning right now, right? Like cruelty's winning. Power, like power for the sake of power is winning, or dominant. Let's say dominant. Let's use that word. Let's not use winning. Let's use dominant. It's kind of the vibe right now, right? I had a great conversation with a friend this week where we were talking about like the two energies. One is extractive energy and one is regenerative energy. And there are those who are intent on extraction. We're seeing it with the Epstein files right now. Like just what an extractive set of assholes who are just preying, right? We see it in, there's a lot of corruption right now. We're seeing it, like the whole thing's happening in this country with the ICE raids and everything. It's just this really ugly energy that's in the world right now. And it feels like the energy of like, we're going to care for each other. We're going to care for ourselves. We're going to care for the people around us. Like that's not as popular anymore. Right. And so when I think about like the gates to crash down or the things to fight against, it's like we have to fight against extraction and we have to fight for regeneration. We have to fight for how do we stay kind to each other? Like, I think it's really important, even in our day to day, of like, I know that like I am a white privileged person, so I could treat all these people like an asshole. I choose not to. I choose not to. I choose to be kinder in this situation. I choose to be helpful or to be supportive. And I think we all have to make that active choice because there's just an energy field around us that is making us anxious and angry and is showing like, it's okay. You can kind of be a dick if you want to. And it's like, no, I'm not gonna be a dick today. I'm just not. Today's Valentine's Day, right? I'm usually not a Valentine's Day person. I'm not. I'm kind of like, it's a commercial holiday. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I can be like such a crank about Valentine's Day. But this year, I ordered flowers for our house, and my husband and I don't bake, but we baked a cake. You know what I mean? And we put like hot pink frosting on it and everything like that. And I think the reason that I'm like, let's just do a little Valentine's-y stuff is because we need to embrace love. We need to embrace the energy of like, I care for you and I care for my friends and I care for my family and I care for the people around us. So to answer your question, Chris, like, it's like, how do you be a warrior for soulfulness and love? Like you got, like in everything that you do, how do you say like, no, we're not going to treat people this way. We're not going to behave this way. Even in the work you do, in every meeting that you do, like come in with kindness, come in with a sense of like openness, because the world is telling us right now that that stuff doesn't matter as much. And it's just like dog eat dog. And like the whole fucking thing is collapsing and every man for themselves. And that's what I want to fight against right now.
You're here.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was so moved. Back to the questions. I think that part of what we are trying also to do with brandLingual, even for, I don't know, young talent or, I don't know, senior talent, is to build the community. And it's not that much about us being at the center that, hey, we are some sort of, I don't know, minds that you need to follow or only learn from us, but it's more about like, hey, you have others around you who can also help you to, learn more and expand your network and be, grow bigger than you are today. So I think that we are
And I think
also.
that is so great. Like I honestly commend the two of you for doing that quite a bit. I think this is exactly what we need to be doing in this moment. We need to be nurturing our communities, whether they're offline or online. And I think the offline ones are really important to nurture right now. So like just a little plug for that. But what you two are doing is that you're using your power to create connection and help and support and bringing people together. That's how that regenerative energy stays alive and wins. And you might just be, I don't know what your reach is like. You might just be 200 people, but like, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? That like 200 people have come together and have learned something, and you have given them a gift of that energy and that knowledge, and they will then and then you're setting the example that this is how we behave and this is what we do. I think that stuff is critical. I think it is so critical right now. And the conversations I've been having in my communities and with friends is like, oh my God, what do you do? Right? Like you're just feeling so overwhelmed. Like, what do you do? And what I've gotten to lately is you just do something. You do something. Everybody has a power. Everybody has a gift. Everybody has an area of influence. And I think like we had this idea like years ago, and I used to have this idea years ago, like like cannon trees, we build a movement, right? Like all that crap. We build a movement. It's like, and if I don't have like 80,000 people hashtagging something, what I've done isn't worth it. I'm so like beyond that thinking right now.
Yeah.
It's like if there are 10 people that what you guys are doing, if you have touched 10 people, and then those 10 people go touch like 2 people or 5 people or 20 people, think about the ripple you're creating in the world. It's those ripples that I think are so important. And I really commend you guys for doing this work. I'm looking at like what Ed Cotton's doing right now. He's doing like a strategy day. I see a lot of the senior leaders in this industry doing these sorts of things. And I think they're all great. I think they're all great because these communities are so important.
Yeah, well, it's very heartening to hear you also affirm that, because it just feels like it's a glass of water in the desert right now. At the core of this, and even in the first question is that Baiba posed, is some vulnerability, some honesty, less like, LinkedIn of like, I'm a master of this and I know everything and all this performative, and just, no, I don't know these things. And in fact, and I used to think this was the thing until I realized it wasn't. And I'm going to admit that. And you know what? I've been teaching something wrong. And now how do I fix that? How do I, and as opposed to, well, if I said it once, I have to stick to it, and I just have to repeat that lie again and again and again and again. So that honesty of our own journeys, of what we've been experiencing on our own paths, and sharing that with others, particularly early career individuals who feel like they have to come in knowing it all already and already be perfect and worrying about what they're saying and not saying. It's giving room in a podcast for someone like yourself to say all the wonderfully, like, just these exhale moments that you've provided, that I've also felt my blood pressure go down a little bit, right? And we hope other people are feeling that, not just in quantity, but in the quality of those interactions. So like the more vulnerability, more honesty, and open, again, crashing down those gates.
And can I just build on that for 1 second? Like, I understand that like trying something different or evolving into different places is really hard, right? Like we talked about before, like we're just not, in some ways humans aren't wired for it. Something that's always helped me whenever I'm trying something new is to talk to everybody about the fact that I'm trying something new.
Yeah.
It's not be like, okay, on this project, we are going to try a new process. It is an experiment. We are doing this so we learn. It's probably not going to be perfect, but we're going to talk about it along the way, and we're going to figure it out, and we're going to optimize. The instant that you frame something up as, I am just trying something, I'm experimenting, I'm probably not going to get it right, but I want to hear about it, let's talk about it, let's have the conversations, change suddenly gets quite easy. It's much easier to do it that way. And one thing that I talk about with some of my clients, especially the big ones, we're like, oh, we got to change like the vibe and or whatever, like they're trying to change stuff. The thing I always say is like, just go to like the 3 teams in your massive corporation that you think are most primed for the change, give them the mandate of it, say it's an experiment, create a node inside of your organization where the change is happening, and then it will happen. Other people will look in on that team and be like, oh, wait a second, like I kind of want that to happen, right? And it's actually easier to create change that way than doing like this top-down womp of change, but create little nodes. So like that happened with BBH when the Chrome team, when the Google team did that, like when 𝗂𝗟𝗄𝘁 came out onto the floor, ripped the stuff out, all that kind of stuff. All of a sudden, the Unilever team did that a few weeks later, and nobody had to say anything about it, right? And all of a sudden, the interns are sitting in the offices, and all the senior people are out on the floor. Wasn't a mandate. I mean, can you imagine if 𝗂𝗪𝘁, who was I think she was the chairman at the time, would have said, okay, guys, we're doing this change. All the creative directors out of your offices, out on the floor. Well, like it would have been revolt. It would have been rebellion. But by 𝗂𝗟𝗄𝘁 demonstrating that and our team really rallying around that, other teams were like, wait a second, maybe we should be doing that too. And so so 2 things there, like one, frame it as an experiment and frame it as curiosity and learning. And it's a lot easier. And if you're trying to create widespread change, find nodes and have the nodes do it and demo it and make sure they're very visible in their demoing. And you'll get other teams to clock on faster than if you like dictated it from the top down.
But I think what you said, Heidi, it also requires a lot of vulnerability.
Totally.
I mean, to talk about like, I'm just trying to understand the process. I'm just trying to figure things out. It's a lot of courage to say these things. If we go back to the beginning of the conversation that, strategists are kind of almost trained to think that they are the smartest people in the room, and then to openly admit like, hey, I'm just, trying things out and I'm not sure where we are actually going.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a big change also in the mindset how strategists should need to operate.
That's a great point, Baiba. And like going back to that BBH team, I think the only reason it worked was because one, like we all like adored each other. Like that team, like we all like, oh, like my heart, like I still am in like close contact with many of these people because they're just like people that I care for quite a bit. And we all held hands together and said, okay, we're going to do this together. Now, it started with the vulnerability and bravery of 𝗂𝗟𝗄𝘁. And so someone has to do it first, right? Somebody has to lead. They were probably more confident because 1, they were very powerful creative directors, and 2, they were brothers. So they had each other's back. Like they always, you know what I mean?
Genetically.
You know what I mean? Like truly they were brothers. But I have found in my own experience, if it takes one person just saying, I'm not quite sure it's like working, could we just like, and come in with a real spirit of vulnerability and curiosity is key, like being super curious. One person, because all of a sudden, like when you crack the facade, other people are like, you know what, you're right. It doesn't, I'm not liking it either. Like sometimes it just takes one person to say, is this really working though? Like, are we feeling good about this? And just asking the question. So that is a step of bravery, Baiba. Absolutely. It's not a crazy step of bravery. Like you can do it and it's very crazy. It's amazing to me how quickly other people will come on board when you do it.
I think the difference is between, yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, it's about being aware and unaware about what you are like, facing.
Yeah.
Like, oh, now I am aware that I am vulnerable. But when you are unaware, it gives a little bit different feeling. And I think this is a big difference if we are talking or addressing this conversation to younger talent who wants to break in and also are listening, our chat, then for them, I think it's much, much more important to kind of encourage them to openly be vulnerable, not to kind of just feel it.
That's fair. And you know what? This didn't start happening for me until I was a few years in. You know what I mean? Like, I also have this mantra. I have a couple career mantras. Another one that I have is to break the rules. You have to know the rules. And so I spent the first, 5 years of my career just learning the rules and learning like, okay, this is how a process works. This is how you write a brief. This is how you do like all the rules. And then when I started breaking the rules, I was able to do it much more intelligently and effectively. So Yeah, like, do I expect like a first year strategist to come in and be like, we're gonna blow up the process and that kind of stuff? Like, no, you might just want to like listen and learn for a little while first, you know? But then there's gonna reach a point like where you're just you're like, yes, I know how this works in my bones, and I know in my bones that like it could be better. That's the point where I think you can start messing with it.
1,000%. Baiba and I've had this conversation several times where it's like, it's like we still need to make room for like punk planning, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
to do that, you need to know what you're disrupting. You need to
exactly.
know what the fundamentals are. Like,
Yes.
like the best, like the Sex Pistols, and
Mhm.
they knew what they were up against, and then they deconstructed it. As opposed to sometimes we see, people early in their career, or even whatever, just coming in with some wild idea that they're going to make their own that has absolutely no connection back to how anything works. And it sounds
Yeah.
cool. And it already has a great distinctive look in the carousel, right? Or whatever it might be, but it's not rooted in something real. And so like first, like understand what the fundamentals are. And then with that information, start to build an improv and do really cool shit with it on the top to give it some kind of new spin or something, whatever it might be. But like respecting those fundamentals and having that as a part of your practice, and then knowingly disrupting it is that's where I think real innovation comes from, as opposed to just what about this?
I mean, it's like Luke Skywalker could not have blown up the Death Star had he not had the plans and knew exactly how the Death Star worked and exactly where the vulnerability is. That little ship pinging up against that thing would have done nothing. But as soon as he had the knowledge and the understanding of how that ship worked, boom, killer shot, right? And like, so that's, I think like when you know how the systems work, when you know everything around you, you know where you can create the killer shots, and versus just banging your head against the system.
Yeah. In this case, the empire.
The empire. Yes, the empire. But even like I'm friends with people who are, indigenous activists, and my friend's dad was really big voice in the American Indian movement in the 1970s. So like really like strong activists. And Russell understood, his name is Russell Means. He understood the US system of government probably better than anybody because he had to understand it so he could credibly fight it. And that's the thing I've learned from activists. Activists are really, really good at understanding the systems that they're trying to change. They don't take that for granted. The good activists, there's a lot of good activists, but like the ones that are devastatingly effective really understand what they're up against and where the weaknesses are. So I've learned from that. That's been an interesting example for me.
I think it's important lesson for everyone who is like thinking that they need to come up with their own framework and start to sell it on LinkedIn to kind of boost their, professional career. And I have been in a lot of these conversations that someone is asking, like, should I need to create my own framework? And for me, it's all answer, learn the fundamentals.
No, you don't need to. I know. Every time I see one of those like carousel spots or carousel posts where it's like, and here's a new I'm like, oh my God, like, no, stop.
Yeah, but then again, it's so hard for a young talent to kind of learn. Like if you
It
open
is.
and you see so many different realities, how to look at brand strategy or creative strategy, and there are so many kind of like opinion leaders who are selling, of course, their view that, hey, this is the right way or this is the only way how you need to think about these things. And these debates are popping up here and there in private WhatsApp chat groups where people are like, especially who are 6 months or 12 months in the business, they are like, hey, I saw this, is it true? And then a lot of more experienced strategists are kind of starting to push back. Actually, no, it's not true. But you still need the community to learn.
I know. And like, I do feel for young strategists. Like, in some ways, it's cool because they can tap into a lot of different teachers and points of view because in a way that we couldn't when we were younger, right? Like, this ecosystem just didn't exist. But Baiba, I think you bring up a really good point. Like, I would say if anyone's saying like this framework sucks or this is the only way to do it, like you have to, there's no absolutes in this, right? Like, so listen to their critiques of a framework or listen to or take in the new framework, but like there's no absolutes. There's no one framework that totally sucks and we should abandon it. There's no one framework that should trump them all and we should like absolutely like, and there's nothing wrong with it. Every framework has its pros and cons and has its places where you use it, the places where you don't, the ways it has to be adjusted, the way it needs to stay the same. Yeah, so like any teachers that are like saying, I hate it when people are like, I hate the post where people are like, this is dead. I'm like, no, it's not. Shut up. Or like, the only way to do this is this way moving forward. Like anytime someone's talking in those types of absolutes, take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, and if those things are dead, there's a whole army of zombie things and walking around because they're still out in the world. In the practice. We guarantee people listening or watching this are inspired by the things that you've said, and you've really touched them in ways that if they wanted to continue to read, experience more of your thinking. You mentioned the Substack, but or anything new coming up, the best ways to kind of stay in touch with what's going on in your world as you move ahead.
Yeah. So I've gone off of all social except for LinkedIn for my own mental health. Like I can't do Instagram. And I used to love Instagram. I used to love it. And now it just like puts me into a pit of depression if I'm on it for any amount of time. So I'm off of everything except LinkedIn. And then I have my Substack as well, which is linked in my LinkedIn. And, so yeah, I'm not spread out anymore. I'm very concentrated in a couple spaces now.
There again, people listening that have now heard, so like permission to now become vulnerable, change your practice, come into a room with the full disclosure and intention to say, you know what, let's try something a bit different, or this is the first time we're going to try this. And what's wonderful about that is that's a immediately actionable piece of advice that you've just given someone, like a prescription that they could go try out on Monday or whenever it might be. Are there things that you have tried that you thought were going to work that didn't work? So in other words, like if you could say like, okay, now we've got people excited about coming in saying, I'm going to do this and this and this and this, but like there's also things like, and we want them to have a good experience trying to, to take a fresh approach or whatever it might be. But are there any cautionary tales that you could speak to say, but maybe your mileage might vary on this one?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the danger in this is swinging too hard where the strategist is so collaborative that you're not putting your points of views down. You're not doing the things that we need to do, right? So let me get that a little more tangible. Say we go into a more collaborative process. Like let's talk about a brief, right? Okay, we're going to write a brief, but I'm not going to go off and write the brief. I'm going to collaborate and write the brief. Let's say just with the creatives, right? To do that, you still have to come in as a strategist and say, first thing we need to do is define the problem statement. I think the problem statement is this. And because I've been doing this research and things like that, I think this is where it is, or maybe we could define the problem this way or this way. Like you still need to facilitate the process. You can't just be like, all right, what are we going to do on this brief, right? So when I'm doing these open collaborative processes, which I just did one this last week. We had to do a sprint this last week. Day one, I went off and I created what I called like a dump doc. And it was like 10 pages of me just writing down thoughts, pulling in, we need to read these 3 articles. Here's what's going on here. Here's what I think is happening here. That sparked the first discussion. But that was my job as a strategist, like the fuel, the 4 C's analysis, right? Like starting to bring in the 4 C's. Then we had a discussion about that. The next day I came in with, okay, actually, I think based on our discussions, this is what the problem actually is. And if this is the problem, these are the 4 things we need to be paying attention to. What do you guys think? Okay, discussion, right? All right, okay, if that's the problem, then maybe we need to do this, this, and this creatively. Okay. And that was a very messy conversation. It was one of those conversations where by the end, people were like, this process isn't working. I can feel it, like it's too messy, right? Next day I come in, okay, here's our 2 strategic pathways. Here's 2 potential strategic pathways that we talked about. Here's 4 potential creative routes that we could go. Here's what I think the pros and cons are of this. Let's talk. Another 2-hour discussion on that. By the end, we got to, this is the strategic pathway, this is the creative brief, and this is what we're going to do. So in every step of the way, I'm facilitating. I'm not just going hands-off strategy. I'm not just being like, I don't know, let's see. But I'm creating fodder for discussions at every step. versus going off and creating the brief. And so what I don't want people to think is, if you embrace this more collaborative stuff, that you're just kind of like floating around. You're turning from a deliverer to a facilitator, and you have to do the facilitation in these processes.
I think that there's a big pattern that we are actually touching in this conversation, and that we have also kind of put at the center in brandLingual. And I think this pattern goes hand in hand with the concept that we as a society, or this is time in history when we are kind of walking away from control and moving into more some sort of processes where adaptability is more important than some sort of like a clear kind of like, I don't know, process where you are writing a brief and delivering the brief, which is about the control, and more about like, hey, I have a new team, I will adapt to this team, I will try to figure out like how to work with them. Do they need a brief? Do we need to have a conversation? Do they need a direction? Do they need whatever is the process that I need to create for them?
I love that, Baiba. I love that. And I think if the one thing I could say to strategists is, a big part of your job, if you're doing it right, is you're a facilitator, and you are creating those processes that you were just talking about, which is different than how we think of ourselves a lot of the times. We think of ourselves as the smarties delivering something. But actually, I think one of the biggest skills that strategists have to learn is facilitation. And how do you, to your point, morph to a team and get them to where they need to be. And you might have to try a lot of different things along the way. So that process that I just talked about that I did with the client last week, that worked for that client. Also, it worked for the structures that we put ourselves under. We have an hour a day to talk about this. That's all we have. So like that hour has to be juiced, right? Now it's different if you're going to sit in a room for 4 days together, which I've done those as well, where you're just like, you're in the rooms for 4 days and you're just banging it out, right? So being able to be a very flexible facilitator and guide is a key facet of brand strategy that I think is different than it was 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like you must do, again, it just sounds like you must do really amazing like post-mortem, like, meetings with your clients you have such a really good sense of what's working, what's not working, leaving space and room to then kind of grow based on their feedback and their input. I'm sensing this, but for all I know, maybe it's just this clairvoyance that you have. I mean, is that also something that you've brought into your process too, to always just be inquisitive about? And it's very meta, right? Like, how did we do the thing to get to know the thing, to know the thing, to do the thing? Like, is that a part of your practice that you've been honing?
You're actually reminding me that like we said we were going to do postmortems with our clients, and we haven't been doing them lately. So like I got to go back to my team and be like, wait a minute,
It sure sounds like you've been doing it.
But to what you're saying, like when you do those iterative collaborative processes, you're getting the instant feedback. Like, is this working? Is this not? And so that kind of serves as like a mini postmortem all the way through.
But Heidi, this was so amazing. Again, I've got a list of things that I immediately want to go run out and practice with. And I have to think also just the amazing Star Wars analogy that was brought in has also, the 5-year-old inside of me has been seen. So what a wonderful way to get me back to my day. But you're a very, very busy person as well. And so just really appreciate all that you've done for the industry for so long, and all the more that you're going to continue to do with it. So people, please do check out and follow Heidi Hackemer in all the different ways that she continues to share.
And thank you guys. Thank you for creating this space. It's so important. And I'm just so honored to have been able to be here with you. So thank you.
It was also my pleasure to meet you again, Heidi. I mean, we have done a hackathon together, and we have had a bunch of conversations earlier, and it was my pleasure to spend an hour with you and hear your wisdom again. And as always, you brought a lot of interesting angles that I haven't thought about, and it's just, as I said, like it feels like we could talk for hours around some sort of campfire and just like, share our stories.
Someday we will, Baiba. Someday I'm going to come to Europe and we're going to make a campfire. We're going to do it. Okay. So until then, thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.